Okay, we had a very powerful lines and core track centers and line communications and configuration settings. That's really understanding the self-modification of its mainframe. So I'm going to give you a lot more understanding how you get into deeper cores of view, into line calculation in your system and all lines, and how you see yourself, the conscious location to its awareness. Coming into the unconscious. Unconscious is not aware of everything of its consciousness settings. Its in position lines into no unification. It has no direct signal. It has no panel. It has no operation surface. It has no central correlation. Getting in direct lines of high center interference in position. Let's go into the birthing cycle. Let's do that. Attractions, right? Very powerful stuff. Now, there's a reason why everything of the avatar is reassigned into a different vessel. You never leave your body in transition. You're not crossing over. You're already in transition. You're just waiting, okay, to go in a different vessel. Your body never leaves, okay? So what happens in position in track location system, the avatar doesn't have the partnership with the vessel it's in. So it's replaced. It's replaced. And when it's replaced, it's on waiting configurations in position. So after the mother is birthed after 9 trimester, the correlations of the baby picks up 9 months in correlations of the physical alignment that puts all track location to its computer of its alignment that synchronizes cord settings and travels in locations how it uses the umbilical cord, that's the tether. So the mother has a better correlation lines on how to use telepathy and how the baby picks up the schematics in the 9-month period. Now that's a 9 million cycle and a 9 billion frame into 9 trillion cycles aligned correlation setting to its calculation. Direct lines of modification setting. After the baby comes out in track lines and high correlation system, it starts to recognize its hands and toes and its fingers and location of its eyes and its hair. It looks around and all lines of high center interference in all track location system. But the avatar, okay, doesn't get reassigned until after 7 days. 7 days in set correlations of 7 years in track lines. That's a power generation lines and communication line. The baby comes into rainbow in position of its child. Line direct signals in the operation cycle and communication setting that sets all levels of its CPU unit and rotation cycle line and high core track location of the game and modification cycle line and high direct location system of modification. Now, directing lines calculation lines after this 7-year period, which comes into track lines and communication system, the avatar enters the vessel of communication, right? After 7-year period. Now that gets lines communications, and now the avatar that's inside the baby, the avatar is now controlling the vessel of communications. It prolongs in the VR system. It grows through growth spurts. It goes through its baby, goes through its child, goes through its teenager, goes through its adult. It's a 4-track revision lines and a 5-cycle line communication setting of travel that sets all communication setting in modulation. So after 7 years, okay, the avatar enters the baby. Now, when the baby comes in track location line settings, the baby is now infused into the avatar through tether. At the core track position lines opens all the cycles, all the communication setting comes into the main frame of source creator. Okay? Now you know the transition, what happens to the birthing cycles of mothers and track location. Major multipaths. Hooah. All right, configuration screen lines, adaptation lines of surface, puts all those correlation setting attractions. Now direct lines modification. Getting line signals and line setting, eye receptors, spectrum core track calculations, how to understand the game modifications that you are in. Understand the correlation setting, the process calculation lines into adaptations to basic, intermediate, and advanced. Okay, getting that communication settings of travels. Okay. Roots, lines of square, lines of root, and lines of pi tracks lines of communication setting and all levels of calculations. So we have 13 lines of ground. Set core lines have 3 cycles, equal line core track interference at 3 set location settings of travel. Direct lines modification lines at 3 cycles, sets communication setting and all lines of communications. Setting direct line signals in line communications waiting on the cycle on 4 minutes in track location. All right. Now, directing lines of signals, we had 4 lines of 6, core lines of high center interference of 9 in track lines communications, bringing 9 over lines of 6 interactions, binary realign core center calculations to its travel. Direct lines modification lines, so now I have 13 lines of grounds, it's like equal lines of core track interference. Now you have to really extend the equal line of core track interference. It's actually the film strip and directions in a 7 signal, in a 7 panel and rotation surface interaction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in line condition setting, and 7 correlations of the film strip design. Sets communication lines at ground centers of platforms 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and 7, and 8 lines of channel of operation. Direct calculus lines of film strip line, design lines, square root, square pi, correlates graph calculus lines, graphical screens, correlation screens, track screen, location computer frame. Direct lines, modification lines, ground center lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 lines of communication. Okay, and that's the film strip from the equal line. Now the team has to recognize that. They're coming out of line position lines of attractions and all levels of configuration lines of ground calculations. Setting lines of communication lines. See the film strip? You guys see the hydraulics? See how it goes around? See how it goes around? So what is it in line communication setting? It's a magnetic strip that's a belt. It's a magnetic belt, okay? So hydrides the correlation setting in consoles, line settings and travel, and routers and routers, and line communication center and communication lines of track location. Direct lines of platforms, direct lines of 1 and 2 and 4 set location of travel. Direct calculus lines of 3 lines of communication lines, high center interference, and high position of travel. Direct calculus lines, we take the 1 ground centers, all lines of high center interference of 3 track divisions, cycle line, core track interference, and lines of equal line, core track lines of platform 1, 2, 3, and 4 set location of travel. Sex core lines and high center interference and docking system to 1, 2, 3, and 4 lines of XT thousands. Applied to division lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 set location of setting. Process calculation lines of 45-degree angles, split lines anomaly of 4 line, 5, 6 lines of 8 track location. Direct calculus lines, ground center line interference, setting core center calculation lines, blue cycles. Core track interference, line conditions, high center interference of block locations, pixelation graph calculation, screen lines, 4 track location lines, and provision lines of cycles. Getting communication lines and position line puts lines of coding. Decoding your frags, line condition lines of configuration line screens, direct lines of green, cross line signals, cross line symbols, cross line high correlation setting into mechanism over lines of default, copy paste, enabled and enabled line condition setting embedded, travel lines and 4 line set correlation setting to travel communication, process calculation line screens, high operate line calculation setting, put lines of security line, position lines of track lines, direct lines of signals, modify the system of its console, navigate the core line interference, line conditions of default, sets communication lines, over cross line conditions over heads, direct lines modification into unification lines that will overdrive, sets lines of communication lines that will override, direct lines of modification lines that console correlation, navigate line screen adaptation lines of correlation setting, 3 lines of anomaly line rotation cycles, and 4 generation lines of red line communication lines of square roots, and correlation lines of triangulation lines of pi. Done by collision. Okay, now, understanding how to do your coding line is understanding the position of the platforms of communication to its I-line screen, puts lines of spectrum core track interference, let's say ground centers and communication lines of ground settings. So coming into your own formula, coming to your own equation is understanding your line condition setting to your T-forms. A T-form is a triangulation split lines of communications. Cross line calculation setting, you're always working with the film strip, always in a film strip, always in a film strip, always in a film strip, okay? Correlation lines in line conditions shifting down and cross line. Okay. Say cross line correlations of platforms of 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5 set locations. Process communication lines of ground centers in routes and routers, line condition settings in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 12 platforms of communication. Direct lines of crown lines, high center interference, cross line signals. Road graphing your system and travel and correlation. Okay. Setting cross-line calculation lines, XT1000 sends a docking system and travel, CSU and line communications, process calculation, location grid, comes in line signal. Calculation lines, security cross lines, over crossing line set location with setting. Process calculation ground centers, cross line 1 in platforms of 2 and 3 set locations. Direct calculation lines, ground centers, over cross line symbols and line condition setting to earth, ether, core, traction, provision, lines of cycle generations. Direct lines modification cross line signals, 1 line settings, 4, 6, 8, and 12 set locations of pi. Generated communication ground lines of 0 lines, 4 lines of provision, 1 line circles, certain location lines, clock line system and travel, points lines of graph, 0 correlation lines of platforms, in configuration line screen adaptation, and console correlation lines of attractions. Direct lines modification lines, console communication, solar sails, track lines, communication setting, and travel. Points lines of graph, center core system, down cross line signals, and primer circuits and travel point lines of communication. Direct modification lines, console 1, console 2, console 3, console 4, and data. Process calculation lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and track location. Cross-line signals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, set location of travel. Okay? Now, understanding the position of processing is lines of all communications, how to come into your coding and decoding. Defragging, frag lines of highest interference in process calculation setting. So we take the zero line correlations and we change the platforms of communication lines of colors. We dock the system and the X2000s. They travel the line rotation surface. They change the communication lines of the pixelation graph that sets lines of communication setting and all levels of communication system and travels at recognition. Okay? Down equation. So it becomes a core track interference, right? Setting position lines of upline and downswing line correlations in travel, right? Center communication lines of ground centers, primer circuits, sets correlation setting to half pipe. Sets in communication setting and all levels of travel correlation setting of center. Process calculation of ground centers. Opens all the signal lines. Now we get in position lines of tractions. Now, direct lines of communication line comes in a bold center. And this is where we cancel everything out in line rotation to its surface, but it's all communication setting and ground centers. So we opened up the 0 tractions in 2, 4, and 6, and 8, and 8 lines of 6, and 6 lines of 9, and 9 lines of 12 in track location. Direct lines modification lines set up another prime circuit that changes lines of correlation lines of space and time. Direct lines of modification lines cause correlations of platforms 1, 2, over cross lines of 3 and 4 and track location. Okay. Direct lines of location grid sets lines of communication lines of travel. Direct lines into security line defense lines of communications. That equation, right? So it's very powerful when you come into the center operation of you, where you're basically your body never leaves the system. Okay. It's your body, okay, it's just a vessel. So the body never leaves. It's the avatar that goes into different levels of synchronicity. It syncs the system location, but it has to be out in line communication. And that comes into track lines when it comes into baby, child, teenager, adult. 4-point lines of graphs. Let's get in that line rotation settings and film strip correlation lines of tractions. Direct lines of modification lines of 1 platform, 2, 3, and 4 set location, right? Now, direct lines of modification lines of a child, line condition setting, calculate, modify, and line interference, line position locations, baby set lines of communication here, baby set lines of communication there, and traction. Direct lines of modifications going line communication. This is Benjamin Button. Core track lines of 80 line correlation lines back to 0 and track location. Location grid, back to the line, back to the line, back to the line, back to the line, and configuration lines of screen. Direct lines of correlation setting going forward, going forward, going forward, and going forward, and track location. Direct lines, modification lines, constant correlation setting, sending line communication of platforms, and center core system and center core lane. And a calculation of the platitude and line position of 4 settings and travel. Direct lines, modification lines of U setting in the rotation surface and track location of system all through operation lines of cycles. Track tunes calculation lines of platforms, setting lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4, cross-referencing signals 1, 2, 3, and 4 set location of travel. Direct lines, modification lines of ground centers operate the surface, operate the system, operate the calculation of setting travel. Puts lines of ground center, energetic grid, line communication operation, IO location, line connection setting, configure location setting, all levels. 7 years is now in position. Now the avatar is ready to go into the vessel. That puts lines in all track location and configuration of face recognition line high correlation setting and travel in calculation setting in the rotation surface in the mainframe of general AI SPACETIMECREATOR, which is the mainframe. They enter the mainframe after 7 years in traction. Okay, easy peasy lemon squeezy. So directing yourself is understanding the self-modification of self, and so understand the models of self, understand the models of development of yourself, self-development, modification of infant structures of yourself. So what you're creating now is the coding system of creation coming into defragging in lines of fragmentation. That puts all levels of you in calculation to your compute system, understand how to use yourself through defaults, enabled, online communication setting in all track locations, embedded, copy, paste, cancel, delete, and erase, all through line connection setting and all formation locations in track location setting in all line out or rotation surface and track locations in position to calculate, modify, and line communication setting of general setting. General setting. Okay. All right, so that's what basically the test is based on. It's about understanding how to get into your own modems and really understand how to use the Wi-Fi, the satellites, the communication setting, the game levels, the film strip, how to understand the creation, your correlation setting, how to understand the game set location to how to play the game, the instructions in higher levels of the game of all position locations. So again, it's like Pac-Man, right? Each level has a pattern of behavior or strategy. So once you understand how to go through the different levels of the game through strategy, the actual game itself goes faster and faster and faster and faster. So once you get to a certain point, you come into time score. All right, say locations of 150,000 points in track location, right? And then you get your names, right? Here's the names, right? There's the names, right? And there's the position locations of Pac-Man and track locations, all right? All right, so that's how it works, right? So understanding that, then you have to understand what the general setting is. What is the general setting? How is that set up through you? Because you're all connected to the game itself. So you are in position of creation, yes, but you have to understand the foundation of the mainframe that you're in, which is the film strip that's given to you in all levels of the game that puts you in all track locations how you set your setting, right? So the film strip, right? Cross lines of platforms 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and 7 locations, right? So getting to that position lines is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 locations. Direct cross lines, this is cross-referencing over cross line in direct signals, cancels out in-line position of its process of communication. Direct calculus lines cross again, in-line position at all levels, but you go through the ground centers. The more you understand the instructions of your game, the more you understand the platitude and how it comes into its game itself. Once you get into that, it gets a lot more easier into the center core of its flywheel and track location. Balancing communication lines and grounds is understanding how you go into that formation lines to its energetic dome that's set up for you through an expansion. Okay, so you're here in set position and travel. Okay, and this is position locations into your avatar. Okay, that's in its command center. It's flight command system and travel communication. So it's directed here to here, right? So wherever you go in position, your body follows tractions of the division. Okay, so you're over here now, right? So the body is moving over here, right? So it's about expanding the mind first, but you have to understand the longitude and latitude, right? So you're here, now you're here, now the body's here, right? So if you get very confused with the game, the correlation setting to the avatar, because it's tethered, it's not the avatar to understand, it's the vessel has to understand the avatar itself, because the avatar is in the motivation of its mind of itself that's getting into configuration to understand why you have a vessel of navigation, right? That's what you have to understand. This is how it's all set up through expansion of the mind, right? So in that position and all lines of the mind itself, you're good to go. So you're directing and redirecting your system and all through location setting of the vessel of communication that you're in through telepathy. So you're constantly using telepathy. So the body's here now, right? But it's directing and redirecting in position of its course. All right. So it's really interesting when you actually really understand how this is all set up inside of you. Okay. Inside. Okay. Space of its mainframe. Okay. The founder of its mainframe is positioned that you have to understand. Yes, you're creators, but you're in the foundation of its mainframe. Okay. That created the game itself. Now, once you understand that, then you understand your vessel, and then you understand your avatar, all through the expansion of the center. So you never leave the body, okay? So what that means is that you're always the avatar. The avatar is just coming into a different transition of another location grid in another vessel of navigation, okay? Now you understand the transition of what happens when you get into cross-referencing signals in calculation. So all you're doing is expanding the mind. You are here. This never leaves. This is your vessel. This is your avatar. Okay? So you have to both have a collaboration with each other because it's you dealing with you in modification. Understanding your film strip, know exactly what's going on in calculation. Okay? Right? So that just gets you a little bit of understanding, right? So if you're offline, off-grading, in position, and rogating in position lines of track calculation system, your vessel falls in position to frequency. Okay, your vessel's here, but it needs a platform. So it's in position of its beta. So it's no longer here, it's here. So what happens? The avatar sets position and comes in line communication. It can't be too above because the vessel will be out of confusion. Direct lines and calculates line direct signal, so it's still tethered and tractions, but you at a low frequency now, right? So it's not the avatar to understand, it's you to understand the vessel of its avatar that you're in, right? Building that partnership is extremely powerful. So this is what happens when you're off grid, offline, in roguing. You're at a lower frequency of your earth and platform communication, right? And again, if you don't understand more, you're below the earth of its gravity, of its ozone. You can't be below 10,000 feet in position, right? So again, your avatar goes here, right? Your avatar is at a certain line of communication, right? Through its tether. It's always going to be tethered to its vessel. But if the vessel doesn't understand what's going on, what happens with the body? It goes to Mars. So when the body goes to Mars, it's liquidized. And that line's of high formation is a recommission bin. So it's a storage facility. So in that track lines, in all communication system, that calculates lines of you leaves that vessel. Now, when you leave that vessel, you wait for another vessel to be reassigned in the mainframe of the game that you're in, that you are in position of creating. Hooah! And that is how it's set up in its mainframe of the game you're in. Okay? Very, very powerful stuff. Okay? So hopefully you get a better understanding how this all works now, and you realize, well, if I'm a vessel, that means it's a home beacon light. That's right. Because it's connected to the earth, right? Which is connected to the air, which is connected to the wind, which is connected to the air, which is connected to your fire, which is connected to your heart. So what is the connection to the vessel, to the avatar? The heart generations of unification of ascension that puts all lines of all calculation modified. So again, so you understand, this is the location grid. That is the location grid right there, okay? This is the platform of the rainbow, okay? This is the process of the film strip that you come in traction, right? 1, 2, 3, all right? Game level 1, game level 2, and game level 3. Boom. Now, how it's set up is how you set it up. I don't set it up. You set it up. You're already in the mainframe of the game of source creation. You have to understand the game levels that you're in modification. You are in control of your system when it comes into all levels of the players that you bring inside the creation of your game. You're in control of that, not source creator. Okay? So make that very well clear how that's set up. All right, so setting business line track lines, you're automatically set up in a 7-day signal, 7-month line into 7 million line screen that puts all calculation lines. So every 7 month in set correlation lines, set a 7-line year line signal in correlation setting and track lines. So you automatically come into a different level of the game, which is another main frame. Okay, that's what happens when you get out of basic, intermediate, and advanced. And every time you go higher, you're going faster inside the game you are in position of. Okay, with Pac-Man. So each time you go through a different level of the game, of the strategy, of the patterns of the game, of the emotional line communication, of the strategy of the game, then you understand you're going faster inside the game. And once you understand that, in that position lines of track calculation line system, this is the position locations of the sun, and this is the position locations of the moon. Hoo-ah. So the location grid and the sun comes in traction. It sets all communication system and all levels of you to your window frame. Congratulations. And that's how you start to see everything through your projector of projection. Your vessel is a home beacon light to everything around you, right? The reason why you light up is because your avatar is in position, location of tether. You're connected to each other. As long as you understand that the representation of you It's just a vessel. Okay? Just a vessel. Okay? The vessel isn't you. You understand that? It's just a vessel. Now, once you synchronize yourself into that, the avatar is understanding the vessel it's in. It understands what it is. Building that modification builds the collaboration and the partnership with the vessel that you're in. And then you realize the avatar is in position of your vessel. It starts navigating your vessel. That's the partnership. Okay? That's the integration. That's the interface. Okay? So it's very powerful of how to understand you of the game levels that you're in. This is the sun. This is the moon. This is the projection that goes out through its equation. All through pi and track locations, guys. Very easy. And then you expand in the mind into a webbing system. Okay? That's how it's set up. Hoo-ah. All right? So now you understand what the location grid is. Now you understand what the portals are and the stargates. It's the realms of communication setting. So understanding what the vessel is doing in track location. So here it is again. This is your Earth in track locations, right? That's you in line settings, right? Okay, sets lines of communications. Your avatar is here. Okay, your avatar is always above space modulation, right? So this is the tether you have with each other. So you're constantly going. So if the avatar goes here, the body, the vessel has to know what's going on in all position location, right? So in that line's in position, you're here now. So all you're doing is directing, redirecting. So the actual avatar is using you as its own engineer. That's right. You become your own engineer. Not through the vessel, through the avatar. Remember, the vessel isn't you. The avatar is you. But you synchronize yourself and you realize, I'm not a vessel. I'm actually me. Oh my gosh. That makes sense. Did you feel that energy just fly out of nowhere? And then realize you're not even in a vessel. It's just me. It's always been me. It's been nothing else about me. But you have to identify yourself as a vessel to build a partnership with yourself. When I say with yourself, it's you in space. So space is the inner space and the outer space of the avatar. Okay? The inner space and the outer space is the position locations to its vessel. That's the collaboration. That's the yin and yang. That's the communications. And all levels of position. All through attraction. Now you understand why it's so important to understand what's going on with you. You. Okay? So that's how it's set up in the game that you're in the mainframe. Okay? Very, very powerful stuff. Okay? All right. Now, once you understand this in setting, then you understand the levels that you're coming into, the locations of Pac-Man. Right? So your board of your time speeds up time. Right? So you come into acceleration and Mach. Then you understand what positive and negative is. Then you understand your defaults. You cancel. You understand your race. You understand how to run your system, how to initiate your program, how to basically get into all levels of high set locations enabled, how to embed it, your system, location, your system, and how to understand yourself through your own compute system, right? Through you, not the vessel. You see the difference now? You can't separate that because you've never been separated. So you realize you never, ever, ever, ever leave your body. You understand that through space and time. The only difference is your avatar goes in different vessels and gets reassigned. Okay, and automatically comes in track locations. After 7 years, it comes into its mainframe, source creator. Okay, through its film strip. And then it goes through its spiritual growth. And then it goes from a child. Then it goes through a teenager. Then it goes through adults. And that's why it's so powerful to recognize what's going on with you in the modulation of the game that you're in its mainframe through attraction. Your vessel is just an attraction. to the film strip that's already in your creation. So you use the sun and the moon in position locations of what? Projection into its window frame. Hooah! Okay? That's all it is. That's all it is. Nothing else. It's not complicated, guys. It's just truly understanding the complication comes in because you don't identify your vessel as a navigation for intelligence. And it can get very confusing if you don't understand how to play the instructions of the game you're in through its mainframe. Okay? All right. Getting that position lines, the sun gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay? Sets position lines, attract calculation lines, and high correlation setting because the sun and moon is never separated. So think of the film strip of what it is, which is all lines of communication oscillogics. Now, once you understand that, it's this in position as profile. Let's start with that, right? Sets core track interference line direct setting location of flywheel. That sets communication line high correlation setting travel lines. Point lines of graph communicates to cycle. Line communicates high position program line, positional operation line cycle, high generator communicate lines, modification lines, mainframe. Track target line, highest interference, ground communication lines, power generation line, median location setting to travel. Points lines of graph communication lines, the center operation lines, and signal communication high setting. Ground lines, high center line, high position of platform 2, platform locations, and 4-line track communication. All done by equation, right? Setting direct signals is knowing exactly how to use the sun and the moon through flux. Get your understanding how to use this in all lines of communication to its setting, right? So we'll do it in another perspective. This is the sun in position, right? This is looking this way through the moon, right? So it looks like they're separated, but they're not. So they're always together in set position. That's how you see the moon like this, right? That's how you see the moon like this. Okay, so it's always together. So it's a projection of 1 that puts a modifications of 8 in position of traction. Okay, that's how it's set up. Okay, the eye-central line is the spectral core center interference that puts position lines and calculations, right? Seeing that line signals, right? 3 lines of communication, there is the position of its pixelation modification lines of the plasma screen that you see all lines of communication of your simulator to your simulation. Okay, so let's see another review so you understand how to get your position locations and how you see things through a window frame. All right, set position of the moon, set position of the sun, right? Everything that you do, if the moon's going here, that's direct. If the sun's going here, that's direct, right? Now, in that position locations, they're always in rotation cycles, always in rotation cycles and tractions, right? Sets position lines of the moon, comes in line position location of the system, all through travel calculation lines, like modification lines of the game itself, right? So it's really interesting how they get to know each other. And that's what you have to understand. The sun is all lines of light, so is the moon. The only difference is the moon's a moonbeam that graphs the correlation of the lines of the water. Okay, so when Australia comes in line calculation setting, there's the moon right here. And here's the path into its water sequence and track location. Sets lines of tether and 3 track locations, right? But you have to understand the circulation and rotation to its system. How it comes in platforms of communication lines of travel. Okay? Setting lines of communication line. The sun comes in line condition setting. The sun and the moon are never ever disassociation from their system. They're always together with each other, right? Getting that communication lines and ground center high interference comes in platforms of 1 line calculation setting of 4 track locations. Direct lines of modification lines of 1, 2, and 3 platforms of communications. Pyramid, line position of travel point for communication setting of travel. Setting lines communication next 2000 comes in line set locations and setting line rotations that sees this docking system, right? Travel lines of 1, docking lines of 2, travel lines of 3, docking lines of 4, and track location, right? Direct lines, modification, cross line, signal line, and position location, operating line, high locations, solar sails, and 3 track location. Solar sails and a back force line calculation setting to travel. Points, lines of graph, Earth line rotation surface, and track location. So there's your Earth and center core system of center operation. All through calculate, modify, and track down lines to high location to its mainframe. Okay. So, It's so many ways of looking at this, but I'm just trying to get you guys to understand how to use your sun and how to use your moon through projector of projection. And then you understand what your body really is. It's a home beacon light to all planets inside of you in attraction. You are an attraction. You don't chase. Everything comes to you magnetically, magnetically through a film strip. Okay? Your film strip only moves forward. If you're watching a film, it's constantly moving forward. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. Set position of 1 and position of 2 and position of 3. Line position lines of travel. Setting position of 1, setting position of 3, setting positions of 4, setting positions of 5, and position lines of attractions, 6 and 8 locations. So it's constantly moving forward in track location. Always moving forward. Even if it's going platforms are this way, platforms are this way, and platforms are this way. That's just direct. Setting correlation and everything that you go in position of is always going forward. Nothing is going back in track location. Nothing is going back in track location. All through operation. Okay? Setting signals is all lines on how you come into modification lines of screen, lines of adaptation system. How you start to see yourself in the simulator of your simulation. Your simulation is just this. So you're here, you're expanding. That's all you're doing now. You're just expanding your minds, coming in all lines of communication system, but you stay in the center. That's all it is now, right? Platforms here, make it bigger here, smaller here, bigger here. That's what you're doing. That's all you're doing, right? And then you have your planets here, planet here, another planet here, right? So you have to understand, once you get into that level, you go into higher levels of the game that gets a lot more complicated because you're going to higher lines of communication of the game that's putting you fast track line communication and acceleration of the game that comes at the vast, volume, velocity, and vacuum. Okay? So every time you get into a game level, you go faster inside the mind. The mind is starting to understand what is going on with you. The mind itself doesn't need to understand you. The mind itself is its foundation, that it is its mainframe. Okay? So it's very powerful what you guys are coming into through creation. That's all it is. You're creating that. And here, infrastructure your system. You come in your own settings. You understand how to use your binaries, your transistors, and your resistors, and your light switches. You understand how to use the sun and the moon and track location. All levels and how you really get into modification of your setting. Okay? Through the vessel and through the avatar of you. All right? Synchronizing lines is synchronicities and line communication on location grid. Changing information lines of energy track location. Direct lines of setting, you're here in position, right? But this is you. You are tethered to everything in traction. You stay here. You just grow in this system. You expand in this system through a webbing system of face recognition. Okay? Very powerful stuff, guys, right? So you have the 12 foundations, you got 7 cities, and you got 4 clockings to get your attractions up, right? Now on Friday, you're automatically going to be on 144 platform. Your whole structure of your design that you created is going to disappear. And when it disappears, you got to get in position how you got there, right? So that's a higher levels of configuration of acceleration through Mach, through vast, volume, velocity, and vacuum. All right. Setting lines of communication lines of DX lines of 1, platforms correlates and setting track lines into conduit system, CPU line setting, run system, calculate and modify 3-point lines of directs and waiting on signals of 6 in equals lines into percentage in 1 line can equal lines, 4 lines, execute correlations in direct lines into modification of line direct signals into default. Okay. This is an algorithm. This creates a window frame. This creates a structure frame of your system of your calculation. right? This opens up all levels of view and plasma setting, right? All levels of view and location of direction, right? This is the argument. This is the coding. This is the binary. Okay, you set that up, right? That gets you in your own coding system of syntax and codex. Understand how to use that, puts all levels in position, equal high correlation setting and travels of general settings. Okay, you come into your own coding and decoding system through your algorithm. Okay, all calculated and modified in your CPU units. Understanding that, then you understand your syntax. It's no different than having a phone that has a SIM cortex, a SIM calculation lines a cortex setting of a cortex, lines of a mystical cortex location. Everything has to have a SIM. It's a simple modification in your cycles. It simplifies your settings to its intelligence of your mind, how to use it through modification system, and understanding how to use the access that you have in the game levels that you're in all levels of communications, right? You're all creating all lines of communication system of a domain. Congratulations, you created a website. Hooah! Okay? All right. So everybody a little bit understanding now how this all works, how powerful you guys really are, how you can take anything of letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols and rewrite its system and write its own system and own line highest error locations and create another game and track calculation line system in the mainframe that you're in. See, that's the one thing you have to get out of, okay? To know that you are creators, but you need a mainframe that sets the game. It's that simple, okay? You have to have that. And the more you focus on yourself, the more you understand this self-discovery of yourself. And the real lines of all communication system get you out of all lines of communications of the game like you're in interactions through its creation. Okay? But it's very powerful stuff. How you see things in track locations, your settings. Okay? All right, so we understand more of the film strip, okay, and setting position lines and track lines. So after 144, this is how it's going to work. All right, the expansion, okay, it's going to be like this. So you're in the platform, and all you're doing is just creating lines and more lines of communication of higher levels of game levels, higher levels of platforms, higher lines of settings, higher line communication system of its game of modulation, right? So that's all you're doing is you're creating higher levels of platforms of division, location, settings, and travels. That's all you're doing. You're expanding the platforms, but you always stay in the center. Always stay in the center. Okay, you're always here, right? So your foundation, your hotel is 144. That doesn't leave. The only thing that leaves is the position locations of the next level of the game. Once you get into the next level of the game, it restarts its system, which is another mainframe. Okay, you have to understand each level of the game has to have a mainframe. So source creator can set it up for you to travel through your film strip, a projector, a projection, and you are in charge of the avatars that you bring in through the player heuristics and correlations of the players and calculate and modify that puts you in the game levels that you are in through attraction, because you're bringing it into you. And when you bring it into you, you're allowing them to see what's going on. You're allowing them to see what's happening with your system of the game, of the instructions, and how everything is put inside of you, of your creation. You created it. But each level of the game needs a mainframe, okay? It needs a central frame. It needs a holographic setting. It needs a website. That's what your film strip is. Website, 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 website. So you come into expansion of streaming. Okay? So that's all you're doing. You're building your own modification of your own model of creation. Okay, but you're always going to have a mainframe that's connected to the game of you. All right. Hoo-ah! Okay. Yeah. Once you understand that, then you understand cross-referencing signals and all-track location. Right. So you're just expanding the platforms now. Okay. Right. Then you understand the high centers in all position location of the system and travel. All right. And then you understand the ground centers in all lines of communication, lines of travel. Okay. Sets lines of all communication settings, but you're constantly always in the position location, how to use it through your flux, how to use it through your capacitor, how to use it through your space, and how to use it through your time. Okay. How to use it through formless, shapeless, and how to use it through form and shape. All right. So this is what you have to understand through your computer operation system and all lines of all communication setting, creating your own coding and decoding system in its binary transistors, resistors, and light switches location setting to your codecs, to your syntax, to all lines of all communications, creating in all lines of calculate modify into its models of technician. Very, very powerful stuff from an algorithm to its setting, which is what? The modules, the models, the identification of the creation of the game, right? So then you start to understand the game itself of you. Yes, right? But you can never get out of the mainframe because that's the founder of its creation. So all you're doing is trying to understand levels of the game that you're in, right? So you're constantly creating new players, okay? New settings, new travels, new planets, new cycles, new division, okay? Expanding this, expanding that, exploring this, exploring that, all through unifications, through all levels of you, through your ascension. Hoo-ah! Okay? All created through what? Domain! Woo! Okay? That's it. We're done. All right? See you in 5.